I challenge you to a duel.
Hello and welcome to the Movie Duel podcast. My name is Peter and I am your host. Ordinarily on the Movie Duel podcast, myself and one of my co-hosts pick a subject that's based around films, and then we each pick a movie that we think best fits that subject. However, this is one of our bonus quick draw episodes in which we invite a special guest to talk about the movie duels of past and discuss what they would have picked for some of the subjects that we've discussed on the podcast already. This time around, I'm joined by Ben Murray from Filmbusters. You'll be able to check out some of the links to the Filmbusters podcast in the show notes for this episode, so please do check those out. Just a few quick notices for this episode as well. Our next episode will be reverting to our usual format of Movie Duel episodes, the first of which Jamie Russell will be joining me to discuss the most overrated gangster film ever made, and will be landing in the near future. And just to let you know how you can get in contact with us here at the Movie Duel podcast, you can do so by following us on social medias, on Facebook, on Instagram, just search for the Movie Duel podcast, and on X and on Threads you will find us at Movie Duel Pod. And you can also contact us via email, movieduelpodcast@gmail.com. So if you're interested in giving us suggestions, feedback, if you're interested in maybe coming on one of our quick draw episodes, just get in touch through one of those methods. And then finally, just a note about this episode, there will be minor spoilers and there is strong language also. So without further ado, let's head on over to Quick Draw with Ben from Filmbusters.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions, and I want to have them answered immediately.
So my guest at this time is a podcaster, movie lover, beer lover, music lover, cat dad, ukulele player, and film snob. It's Ben from Filmbusters. Ben, how are you?
Very happy to be here, Pete. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I did nick your profile off Twitter there just for your introduction.
I didn't realize that's what you were doing at first, and I thought, God, the guy really knows me. But he went in for beer lover straight away. He really knows me. Either that or I have a problem. But I'm very happy to be here, Pete. Thanks a lot for inviting me on.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Ben. So, do you want to start off just by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Filmbusters?
I will indeed. So, hello, listeners. I'm Ben from Filmbusters. Filmbusters is a trio of friends who have been busting films since 2017, end of 2017. That's myself, my co-host Paul, and Adam. And we just take movies to town. We don't really do themes. We just pick a year, and then we do 3 or 4 films from that year over 3 or 4 films, 3 or 4 episodes, and just come in with our hot takes on it, I suppose you might say. And we love it. I think a lot of mutual listeners we have, Pete. So many people who listen to us will have come to you, and hopefully many who've listened to you will have come our way as well. The British Film Podcast pool is not super strong, but those who are in it are impeccable.
Oh, it's definitely a great community. I mean, you know, I got put onto you by the one Jamie Russell, who'd obviously guested on your podcast a couple of times before he joined the Movie Duel family, and you know, and he put me onto a lot of Movie Drone and a lot of great British podcasts about movies. One being Filmbusters, and
obviously likewise when we heard that Jamie was going to be on your pod, and we listened in, because it's the truth, we hadn't crossed paths up until that point, I don't think, until Jamie had guested. And then found you, and it's like I think I said it in a comment on Twitter, but it's true. You I know this is meant to be the part where I talk about Filmbusters, but give me a moment to say that like you were genuinely a fantastic discovery in 23 because I'd had the same old podcast who I love, but nobody had broken the ranks for several years. I'd had,
Oh,
Movie
wow.
Drone were the last ones to break the ranks. That was about 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago. And now I have you in constant rotation. You've got such a soothing way about you, Pete. I know that the
No,
boys
thank you.
over at Movie Drone talk about your voice as well, but that it's not just the voice. You're very cool-headed when talking about film, and that's appreciated rather than an overdrive music video game podcast aesthetic. So
Well, bless you. Thank you very much for saying that. That's and likewise, Filmbusters. You guys are regularly on my rotation now, and look forward to what's coming next. I think you guys are
yeah,
taking a bit of a break over Christmas, haven't you? And
we have, and we're our first episode of 24 is going to be. I know you've just done one. We're doing the same, dropping our highlights of 2023. We record that tomorrow, so that will drop in the next few days, and then I hope to give you all one a listen in the next couple of days too. So
fantastic.
scrubbing out 23 and onto 24 and all the film goodness that
Yeah,
it
it's not been
holds.
great, has it? Really, 23. I don't think.
I mean,
Very average.
it has. There's been a few good films in there, but I think I hate to say it, but my favorite film of the year, which I guess I can reveal because it will come out after our episode does. My favorite film released in 2023 was John Wick Chapter 4, and I think
Oh
I've got
wow.
to say, I mean, it was a good film, but if that was the best the year could offer, that's saying something for the year.
Wow.
Um, so
I must
yeah.
admit, I've not watched any of the John Wicks. I need to get off the saddle on that and start watching them.
It's great not to be on the bandwagon. Stay off it. There's no need. Don't give in to that nonsense peer pressure. You don't need to bring John Wick into your life.
I have much more of a habit of watching films that I know are going to be shit, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Normally, because half of them have been recommended by us to go and check out.
Uh, okay, so obviously this is one of our quick draw episodes, Ben. So we've invited you on to discuss some of the movie jewels of past and get your sort of take on what you may have picked, what you thought of our choices. And so, are you ready?
I am ready. I have my selection in front of
Okay.
me.
So we're going to go way, way back to the start, episode 1, in which myself and original co-host Liam discussed our choices for the most underrated sequel ever made. With my choice of Predator 2 from 1990 and Liam's choice of Gremlins 2, also from 1990. But what say you, Ben?
Two good choices that you both had. If I was going to pick, if I was going to agree with one of you, I would probably go with Predator 2.
Ooh,
But I haven't seen either in such a long time. It's very, very hard to judge. But I am, since my actual pick was already stolen from underneath me by Lexi when she guested with you
oh, right,
recently,
okay.
Ghostbusters 2.
Ghostbusters 2. I watched it again only, well, New Year's Eve I watched it. New Year's Eve film.
It's a New Year's film. It's
Yeah.
a New Year's film, absolutely. So I can't pick that. So I'm going with something which I hope you will allow if
Okay.
it fits your criteria. It is a sequel, but it's a sequel within an existing long-running franchise, and it's the second in the newer installments.
Yeah, that
So
should
this will
work.
make sense. Hopefully this makes sense when I say that the most underrated sequel, hands down, definitely, certainly of the 21st century, is Halloween Kills.
Wow, okay. Okay.
And I will go to bat for that film. Hell and leather. Because remind me, Pete, are you a Halloween purist? Have you seen all the Halloween films? Do you
I
like?
have seen all the Halloween films. I'm not, do you know what? The Halloween franchise is not, I wouldn't put it in my favorite sort of horror franchises. I do like a lot of the films and I respect, obviously, the road that the original paved for cinema. But I don't find myself revisiting them a lot.
Yeah.
Not as much as something like Friday the 13th, which is my sort of slasher slasher franchise. But yeah, I would say I'm a fan though, still.
Everyone has their own franchises, right? And Halloween was absolutely mine. I was watching it way, way too young growing up. And I just had all the VHSs and they were constantly on rotation. But the thing is, I feel because I lived through and watched so many of these awful Halloweens, like Halloween 5 is dreadful. It's a dreadful piece of
Yeah.
work. However, I was watching it all the time. Loomis was in it. It had its charm. There were these moments, there were these things that gripped me. So I think when you've been almost brainwashed by some of those films to the point where you will defend them, how
Yeah.
can something like Halloween Kills come under such scrutiny? It's like it can't. Halloween Kills was different. It was a different Michael, and I do think it is better than the 2018 Halloween, because
Okay.
the 2018 Halloween sort of played it safe. It was like, okay, it's great to see Michael again, but this new Laurie as a sort of warrior soldier, I didn't like it. It was like the Sarah Connorification
Yeah.
of her, and Michael felt a little okay. Great, I loved seeing him coming out of
Mm.
the asylum and as an old man. Great, a bit of humanity in there, but the brutality of Halloween Kills was terrifying. It made him scary again, and the ending I thought was super ballsy. It's really
Mm.
rare for a horror film to do what it did. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but for the reveal at the end, I think would have taken anyone back, and I think it
Mm.
took a lot of people back for the wrong reasons for them, because they were like, "That was why'd you do that? That undid a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff that you did." But for me, it just got me so hyped up and excited for the franchise again for the first time in a very, very long time. And even Evil Dies Tonight. That it's a punchline, and I know that it's a punchline, but I love that it's now part of the Halloween canon. I think it's amazing. It's relevant again. People talk about Halloween again because
Yeah.
because of that film, and I don't think it's because of 2018.
No, I don't think. Oh, yeah, I didn't. I can't sit and say that I hated Halloween Kills because I didn't. Because I thought it had a very interesting concept to it, and I don't. But I don't think the same way that Halloween Ends had a great concept to it, and I just
Mm,
don't think it was properly sort of executed by David Gordon Green. And and I would even say that The Exorcist Believer had a really interesting concept to it, but
mm.
it just completely whiffed it. Um, and Kills I think is definitely worth a watch, but I wouldn't say that it excited me in any way.
Yeah, I reckon, Pete, if David Gordon Green had taken on a new trilogy of Friday films, you as someone who probably gets a kick out of Jason and just seeing Jason doing his thing, even though you're not gelling with David Gordon Green, I reckon you would like a Friday the 13th David Gordon Green trilogy, because he would do something different, a little different, but also at the same time true to Jason.
Possibly, but I mean, do you know what? I hated the Friday the 13th remake.
Oh, it's appalling.
And and really, does it really go much, in any different direction to the original sort of set of films? It doesn't. It just condenses it all into one film, really.
Yeah.
But it was just it felt like a Rob Zombie film.
I,
It's sort of very mean-spirited and
yes, it did.
trashy.
Trashy is the word. It's interesting you say that, because one of my uh, second choices for most underrated sequels was going to be Devil's Rejects by Rob Zombie.
Oh
However, I
God, you
don't
said
think
that.
it's
I thought
underrated.
for a second there, I thought you was going to say Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie.
Oh, no, no, no.
It's like, stop this recording.
Yeah, I would not, I could not in good conscience defend that one.
Excellent.
There you go. Halloween Kills. I'm off to a bad start, Pete, I know.
Okay, so then we're moving on to episode 3, still with Liam, which we taught the most overrated Best Picture winner. Liam's choice of Titanic 1997 and my choice of Braveheart from 1995. What about you? What do you think?
So out of the two of them, I would agree with you again, because I think
Yeah.
Titanic still has a little merit, even though it's not for me. But I think it has technical merit. It's still Cameron doing something epic and immense. But mine is going all the way back to 2006, I believe, maybe 2005,
Okay.
and see if you know what it is, Pete. It beat, and this is also what makes me bad. This is why it really makes me mad. It beat Brokeback Mountain for Best Picture that year at the Academy Awards.
2005.
It also beat, these films are not all that significant, but it beat Good Night and Good Luck. And it beat Steven Spielberg's Munich. I can't remember what the other one is.
God, no, you totally lost me. It's not The Pianist, is it? Did The
No,
Pianist win?
I think the pianist one. No, well, this is Crash. Paul Haggis's
Oh, God, yeah.
Crash.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about this film, but I've seen it once in the cinema when it came out, and it's one of the great cinematic ordeals of my lifetime because there was nowhere to run, and I have only myself to blame that I didn't just run.
Yeah.
I think the problem is, first of all, at the time I was a big Due South fan. Do you remember Due South?
I do, yes. The Canadian Mountie.
You got it.
Yeah.
So,
Deacon Backer. Hey.
that's right. Exactly. What a beautiful dog. And Paul Haggis, the creator of that, he directed it.
All right. Okay.
I was like, okay, let's go and check out this guy's film. And I think it is such a clumsy attempt at trying to say something profound about racism. And the clumsiest thing of all is it's a white man that is telling that story and is putting all these words in all these characters' mouths. And there's just this tone deaf. You have Matt Dillon's police officer who he sexually assaults a black woman during a stop and search, if I recall correctly. And then later in the film, they try and say, oh, but he has levels because look, he's helping her after the car crash. It's like, fuck, Jesus, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're humanizing someone who is doing something monstrous. And the whole film was so candid. Like, Ludacris is just constantly offensive to other minorities throughout the film with no comeuppance. And it's like, I can imagine Paul Haggis going, oh, it's okay. If we get Ludacris to say it, then it will sort of be funny. It's like, but what are you trying to do? Are you telling this great, profound piece on racism, or are you just jamming in all these pieces of a jigsaw that don't match up? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I remember watching it. I don't think I went to see it at the cinema, but I remember watching it not long after it sort of got released on DVD or whatever it was at the time. And yeah, it just didn't do anything. It was just it was just a film, like you say. I think it tried to deal with a tough subject and just completely it just didn't address it other than
it just missed the mark.
Stylizing it, I suppose, really is probably
exactly. And I don't know if you can remember, the trailers for it was Don Cheadle's narration, and even when you look back on it, the narration was so cocky as well. It was like people just crash into each other, and it's like, what are you talking about? Stop trying to make it out like you're a poet. This is written by the writer of Due South. The writer of Due South cannot tell this profound 21st century tale on racism in America. Yeah, and the fact that it won Best Picture, this is what kills me, Pete. I didn't really realize it won Best Picture until I was preparing for this. and I was looking, okay, let me look at the Best Picture winners to see that beat out Brokeback Mountain is Criminal. And I don't even think Brokeback Mountain is an amazing film, but it's so much better than this.
No, I think, do you know what? I think that's probably why it sort of went under my radar, because obviously I did the research before we did the episode.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was anything, there wasn't anything I could put my finger on that year and go, well, that was better. And I think obviously Braveheart stood out a lot more.
Yeah.
Against films like The Usual Suspects and Seven and things like that weren't even nominated. Truly criminal.
truly criminal. But yeah, let Paul Haggis never make a film again, I say.
No, definitely not. Okay, so moving on to episode 5. This is the first time that Nicole Davis joined me for worst video game adaptation. We talked about Super Mario Bros. From 1993. Which was my choice, and Blood Rain from 2004, which was Nicole's choice.
Yeah, so you're very wrong on that Super Mario Brothers take, Pete. I've got to tell you, very wrong. That is so much fun, but I haven't seen Blood Rain, so unless Blood Rain's a masterpiece, I think I would be siding with Nicole there. But my worst video game adaptation, and it's part of Filmbusters lore and canon. It's one of our earliest episodes. We did it. It was the recent Tomb Raider adaptation.
Oh, right. I've not seen that.
Yes. Okay. So you've played Tomb Raider before, have you?
I'm an OG Tomb Raider.
Okay. You locked the butler in the freezer and all that stuff in the training levels.
When Tomb Raider 2 came out, I broke my ankle. I was off school for close to 3 months, I think it was, and I played and played and played Tomb Raider 2. So I did everything that you could do.
God, what a life. Amazing. I did just see the other day that Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 have been repackaged for the PlayStation for like £10. I thought,
What?
I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to do that.
I need to get a PlayStation.
Oh, mate. But the point is, if you played the game, you've watched the film. And the reason it's bad is because it is like watching someone play the game. It doesn't do anything new. It's like, okay, here is the film opens up with Lara Croft. I think the actress name is Alicia Vikander. I think that's who plays her. And it starts off with her on like a bike with a foxtail hovering off the back of it, and she's cycling through all these streets and all these other people on bikes trying to catch up with her. And you're like, this is a tutorial. This is the tutorial level of the game immediately at the beginning of the film. And everything that happens after that is like a new section of a video game. It's like, that's fine if you're controlling it, because then the fun is you're making her jump and fire here and this, that. But when someone else is doing it and it's not engaging, it's like, oh God, I'm just over at a mate's house and he's playing PlayStation and he's forgotten. Yeah. There's a couple of nice shots in it, but not many. And Dominic West is awful as her dad in it, and it's just really, really soulless. It's really soulless. And I've not seen the Angelina Jolie ones, so I can't say if this one is better or worse or on the same level.
I think that they were okay films, the Angelina Jolie ones. I mean, I've only seen the first one, but I've seen bits of the second one. But that at least had kind of, it had this sort of Indiana Jonesy type twist to it, and then sort of melded the Tomb Raider lore around it, kind of thing. Yeah. So it kind of worked in that way. They're not great films, they're not.
No, but and that's also because like they don't. I mean, whoever thought that you could adapt Super Mario Brothers either, though? But they're not the kind of games that work for a movie adaptation. I think they exist to immerse yourselves in, and that's where the distinction should be between, particularly now, video games now are so movie-like. Yeah. Like Uncharted, for God's sake, you play Uncharted, and it's like you're controlling a movie. But then I don't want to then see that on a big screen where I can't control it, because then it's, well, this is not fun. I'm just seeing action sequences that aren't particularly well executed, because they're not directed by action directors, for one thing, as well. They're just people who've gotten the right connections that have told them they can adapt a video game. But yeah, why would I want to watch the movie when I can literally play it,
Exactly. Okay, so moving on to another Nicole episode. So this was called Failed Nostalgia, or Films We Used to Love But Not Anymore. So Nicole's choice of Face Off from 1997, and my choice of Batman Forever from 1995. And now I know your Filmbuster cohort would probably kill me for this episode, but
yeah, he would. He absolutely would.
But what about you? What do you say?
So Face Off, I love, and that holds up. In fact, when I rewatched that recently, it went up to like a 10 out of 10 film. But Batman Forever, I never liked it because I was a Keaton Batman guy. So I was never hot on that anyway, much to my co-host Paul's chagrin. Yeah, because he absolutely loves it. Absolutely loves that one. But mine is, and this is topical, or it would have been topical a week or two ago, is a Christmas film that I went and saw at the cinema when I was young with my uncle, and thought, oh, so fun, starring my favorite action hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then I watched it last Christmas, and it's Jingle All the Way.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Well, so where do you stand on that
It is a
first?
much loved film. I mean, I mean, what was that, 95? Was it 95?
95, yeah.
95. I think so 95, I would have been about 12. So I think I was just sort of coming away from that sort of goofy sort of comedy style of film and really sort of enjoying them. So I think it was probably just out of my nostalgia wave, I suppose.
Right.
So it was never a film that I really loved. I've watched it in the last few years with my daughter, but it was never one that I was really high on.
Well, I see. I think because I had just not seen it since those cinematic days, for me, it was a chance to see Arnie in a cinema, which at that age, I was 10 maybe. I was not getting the chance to see Arnie films in the cinema.
No.
I was seeing them at home and I shouldn't have been, but going to the cinema, it's like, wow, there he is, incredible. But then to watch him at home, it's like, it's the worst of several things because it's forced Arnie humor, like put the cookie down and stuff like that. Okay, that's a kind of funny line, but they try and jam in all these funny lines. And the funniest Arnie lines are when he's not trying to be funny.
hmm
That's what is so good. Or anything from Kindergarten Cop, because that's just handled so well.
Yeah.
But
It's not a Doma.
it's not a tumor at all. Such a good film that is.
I know. You didn't bring your Kindergarten Cop soundboard with you, did you?
Oh well, he might make an appearance to chastise me for bringing this up. But it's also Sinbad. I don't think he really transferred over to the UK as a big name, but
No.
Sinbad's, I don't know what his significance is in the US. I don't know if he's a stand-up comedian or some edgy comedic actor, but he's so grating in it. And he's on screen almost as much as Arnie is.
Yeah.
And it's really, really painful to listen to. On top of which, the set pieces are all ridiculous. They're not that funny all the way through. And it was a massive, massive letdown. And the most ridiculous thing is at the end, his son doesn't know that he's Turbo Man until he lifts the helmet off, even though the helmet's only covering like a fifth of his face.
Batman logic.
It is Batman logic. And I'm sorry to do that to Arnie, but that's
No, I'd take that. I think, I don't think it's as good as everybody makes out. I think it's definitely
it ain't
a nostalgia film, that one.
yeah.
Okay, so moving up to episode 11. So I was joined by Tarquin to talk Best Outlaw Biker Movie with my choice of Mad Max from 1979 and Tarquin's choice of Psychomania, aka The Death Wheelers from 1973. Now, first of all, have you seen Psychomania?
I have not seen Psychomania.
You need to watch Psychomania. It's great.
Okay. Not only that, I need to watch more biker movies because this was such a tricky question.
Yeah.
I was really like having to rack my brain for biker movies and the criteria. Now, see, I've seen Mad Max, but it was a long, long time ago. I don't feel fully qualified to say whether I even enjoyed it or not because it was such a long time ago. And the reality is, a biker gang movie, I cannot even think of one that I've seen. However, I think that this one might just slip in because of how ballsy it is as a movie. Okay. So, since you clearly like them enough for it to be a topic on the episode, I suggest that you check out a film called Nightmare Beach. Now,
Beach, okay.
Nightmare Beach is a slasher film, low to no budget. I believe it came out early 80s. And our killer is a motorcyclist whose identity you don't know. He's always in the leathers. He's always got the helmet on. He rides this huge Harley Davidson around, and the Harley Davidson is equipped with an electric chair on it.
Okay.
And he both rides the electric chair and kills people by putting them on the electric chair of his motorcycle. Now, it is so insane and crazy. Like, it's not a good film. Let's make that clear. However, it has to be seen to be believed and on some primal level enjoyed, because a Harley Davidson with an electric chair strapped to it, terrorizing people. And I think it's like Miami. It certainly feels like Beach, Florida. All at night is joyful stuff. But I know it's not a motorcycle gang, so I feel like I let you down with that
Yeah,
one.
that's fine. It is. I mean, it was a tough one. I mean, for a long time, my choice was Police Academy because of the the guys in the Blue Oyster Bar. That was
Oh
the closest I
man.
could think. But then I thought Mad Max has got a bike on it. That's great. But I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
if it sounds like if you enjoyed that film that you described, Nightmare Beach,
Yeah.
then you probably enjoy Psychomania because that is it's it's a
It's
very
on.
schlocky sort of British. The most of the bike gang are sort of middle class, and I mean it's just got an insane premise to it. But I would thoroughly recommend it because it's probably the biggest sort of find in doing this podcast is Psychomania.
Incredible. Okay, that's a watch list, sir. Psychomania. Do you know, for honorary mention, I know I'm being cheeky
Hmm.
by squeezing this in, but just because it's one scene, and I guess it's a motorcycle gang,
Hmm.
there's a scene in A Bronx Tale where, have you seen A Bronx Tale? It's like, it's Robert De Niro's, he directed it. It's about a kid,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
growing up with all the mafia around him. And there's a
Yeah.
scene where the biker gang come into the diner and they're just behaving appallingly. And then Sonny, played by Chaz Palminteri, brings the mafia in, closes the door, and he says, "Now you can't leave," and just beats the shit out of all of them. That
Yeah.
I probably should have thought of that. But Nightmare Beach deserves its shout out.
And you can find Psychomania is on. There's a free video app you can download called Plex, or is it Flex?
Flex.
Plex, Plex,
Plex.
and it's on there, so you've got no excuse not to watch.
Psychomania, I promise. Great call.
Let me know what you think.
I will.
Okay, so what we'll do at this point, Ben, is we'll just take a short break and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so welcome to the intermission. So this is the part of the episode in which I ask my guest a random question, a question they've not prepared for, and get their honest first answer. So, Ben, are you ready?
No, I don't know. It's a bit intimidating. Let's see.
Okay, so here is your intermission question. So, what scene from a film always makes you emotional? Are you a big crier? Do you cry a lot of films?
Increasingly. I don't know. I don't know why that is.
I think it's age.
I think so. Okay, I'm going to give you this one because it's the first one that came to mind, even though there are quite a lot.
Hmm.
Okay, I won't go into detail about the scene for those who haven't seen it, but it's Marley and Me.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Everybody must know, surely. Surely.
Well, I think if you don't know, you can probably imagine what happens.
Yeah.
But there's something about Owen Wilson's, who annoys me most of the time, but there's something about Owen Wilson's softness when he's just saying, you are a great dog. You're an amazing dog.
Mm.
And it's so manipulative. The whole filmmaking is so manipulative, but so what? It's telling a story. That's what films are meant to do.
Yeah.
It does manipulate you. The closing of the dog's eye, the paw in the human's hand. That's all. So the first time I watched that, I was watching it with my then girlfriend and actually my granddad. Bizarrely, we were watching it on Sky, and while that scene was happening, I had to leave the room because I thought I'm gonna blub like loudly, sob, and this is not. I didn't do that at the time. And I left the room, and when I came back in, my granddad was crying. So it's like, oh man, let's just be emotional with film. It's an okay thing.
Yeah.
What about you?
The one that sort of always gets me is Coco.
Now, okay, I haven't seen it,
Right.
and I really do need to because Paul always tells me it's a tearjerker.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a point at towards the end of the film. There's a couple of points in it. I mean, it's one of those really good Pixar films that really
They get it right.
It's like they get it absolutely right. It's not just completely schmaltzy or anything like that. It's deals with something very real, and the final sort of 5 minutes of the film is just I challenge anybody not to get a tear. It's just brilliant,
I
absolutely brilliant.
I think this is why I've held off, because I know I will cry at that.
But it's a good. It's a. The thing is with it as well. It's a good cry because it's quite a. It's a very positive, emotional
Yeah, I get you.
ending, but it just pull. It's just amazing. I love that film so much.
Do you know Pixar are the kings at doing that, or have been for a
Yeah,
long time?
yeah,
They really, really work their emotional endings well.
yeah. Well, I mean, look at something like right. So, Toy Story 3. Have you seen Toy Story 3?
I have indeed, yes.
So now I remember with my girlfriend at the time, we went to see it. I think we took her nephew to go and see it at the cinema. And obviously, we'd heard that it's a very emotional ending. It's very sad at the end. Now, the point where they're all geared up to go into the furnace and they all
Oh,
reach out and hold hands and stuff.
amazing.
My ex, my partner at the time, she genuinely thought that they would, or that was the point, that it was going to be sad and they were all going to go into the furnace. I'm like,
Yeah.
Disney is not that cruel. Not
No.
certainly not in 2004 or whenever it was. But even at that point, it's drawn you in that much that you think, fuck, are they going to put them in the fight? Are they going to burn up the Toy Story characters?
Exactly. And that is credit to the film, where objectively, that can't be the end, but they've made you believe in that moment that maybe it could be. It worked it so well. I watched that on a plane on my way to Canada for the first time. And as I was watching that, I turned to my girlfriend and I pointed at the screen like, they are about to kill these toys. How can they do this?
That's it. You believe it. In that moment, you believe it. And that's just classic filmmaking, really.
Oh, man. Pixar. One last shout out to Pixar as well. Boxing Day 2020, first year of COVID, they dropped Soul on one of the streaming platforms, can't remember which. Watch Soul, and I can't even tell you what the emotional moment was, but something happened at the end of it, and I burst out in tears. I was in my dressing gown, Boxing Day, getting up. It must have been the emotion of the season, too many drinks and food the day before or something. And I just was blubbing away at it. And it was an embarrassing one because it was like heaving sobs. That's just Pixar. It's beautiful. I encourage more crying at films. I think it's great. I love it. I love to have a cry at a
You
film.
see that, but I had that with just last year with Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, really?
I absolutely broke down at that film.
Wow.
Absolutely broke down, and I was to the point I could hardly breathe.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you had that experience, though.
It was just absolutely insane, and I was only sat in my bed watching it as well. I think.
Don't you think that must be the greatest compliment a filmmaker could receive, is to hear that they elicited a reaction, an emotional reaction like that? That's really tangible.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the point. I tell you where it is. It's the point. Just sorry to spoil it for anybody, but I'm going to say anyway. It's the point where Ke Kwan's character says that how he fights, how he moves forward by being kind and all that thing. And I've always considered myself somebody who tries to be positive and tries to push through and everything else. And just to see that sort of, especially in a relationship as well, and how he sort of views his marriage and just pushing on and being positive and everything else, it just got me so bad. Well, not bad, but good.
That's nice. And again, that's crying for the right reasons as well, as you say, because of a good cry as opposed to a bad cry, which, going full circle, Marley and Me, I guess that's where it gets criticized, is because, okay, you killed the dog, of course that's going to make people cry. Whereas these other things are kind of like, well, you have to earn that, as opposed to just having a cute dog that dies. You have to earn the emotional moments.
Yeah, it's kind of an easy emotional moment, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's your intermission question then, Ben. Thank you very much.
Oh, loved it. Nice question.
We'll head back to the main discussion.
Good stuff.
Okay, so heading on up to episode 12, which was my first with Jamie Russell, in which we talked about our choices for best Bond film. Spy Who Loved Me from 1977, which was Jamie's choice, and GoldenEye from 1995, which was my choice. So, first of all, are you a Bond fan? Do you like Bond films?
I am not. I am not a Bond fan in the
Okay.
classic sense.
Okay.
So I don't think I've seen GoldenEye,
Hmm.
and that's the bigger one. But
Okay.
I don't think I've seen it. I couldn't tell you which ones I have seen because when I did see them, they were always sort of like in fits and starts on telly. Other folks were watching them,
Hmm.
parents had them on or something like that.
Bank holidays.
Exactly. I think there's only two pre Daniel Craig that I'd seen, and it was the one with Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry, that one.
Oh, God, yeah. Die Another Day.
Correct. That's it. And obviously Goldfinger, because I had an N64 growing up and I needed context for the game. So I couldn't tell you which of your two Bond films, which one I would agree with.
Fair enough.
But perhaps unsurprisingly then, my favorite Bond film, and it's a 10 out of 10. I love it. So I do love a Bond film, is Casino Royale.
Okay, yeah.
Bursting Daniel Craig onto the scene. It kind of came at the same time, felt like the same time at least, as when Bale resurrected Batman with Batman Begins.
Yeah.
And it was this sort of, okay, these characters we thought we knew, which were a bit cartoony. I know in the case of Batman, obviously he's from a graphic novel, but the idea of these characters being, silly, unrealistic, they couldn't really exist. And then something like Casino Royale coming around, and it's like, okay, we are seeing a man here who has been trained to be this person, and we see a human side of him. And I think that's why I never liked the Bond films beforehand, is because my understanding, maybe wrongly, but it was always that, look how suave this guy is. He's a ladies' man. He's so cool. He can do everything. And it's like, I don't like those characters. I don't like the cool characters who can do no wrong. I like a bit of humanity in them.
Yeah.
And seeing Daniel Craig in this and seeing him vulnerable, seeing him bleed, seeing him betrayed, if you want, by a woman, seeing like the genesis of his issues with women, which is what I thought at that time, is like, okay, this is why he always sleeps around and is cheating on these women and just working through these women, because we see what Vesper did to him. Or what he thinks Vesper did to him, coupled with Mads Mikkelsen's villain. Oh my God. Le Chiffre. Jesus. What a performance. And the action set pieces, it's a perfect action film, or certainly was for that time. I think we've stepped it up again in the subsequent 20 years. But that as an action film, but also as a Bond film, beat everything before, and they've never managed to surpass it for my money. I know there's lots of fans of Skyfall and subsequent ones, but
yeah, I mean, I always found I quite liked Casino Royale. The ending was a little bit off for me, but I would consider myself a bit of a Bond purist in whatever sense that is. I mean, as I've got older, I when I revisit a lot of the Bond films, I'm a bit like, I can sort of see where the criticism comes for a lot of the classic Bonds. But I always found after Casino Royale, I mean, Skyfall was fine, Spectre's not bad, and No Time to Die is about an hour too long, at least.
yeah.
But I just found them very samey, the Daniel Craig ones after Casino Royale. It was all the same sort of stuff, really, because they were trying to ground it a lot more realistically, and it just meant that they couldn't sort of top themselves, I suppose, and it made it a bit repetitive, I thought.
And exactly. And by that point, Daniel Craig was known as Bond, whereas before Casino Royale, he was doing, I mean, he'd done Layer Cake, but for the most part, he'd done some really quite beautiful British dramas, like indie things. It wasn't widely well known, I don't think. I think Layer Cake was probably the biggest thing he'd done.
What's the one with the air hot air balloon?
Oh my God, Enduring Love.
Enduring Love. Fucking brilliant film.
Amazing film. Yeah.
What's his
good
name?
Film.
Oh God, what's his name?
Rhys Ifans
is fantastic in that film. Fantastic.
So good. I'm so glad that you've brought that up as well. I know it's one of his best.
Yeah.
Casino Royale was probably helped along by the fact that I was a bit of a Craig fan and enjoyed films like that beforehand. So it's good to see him in that. You know, when you say the ending of that you don't really like, do you mean the final moments where where he takes the guy out and he's like James Bond, and it's like, oh, okay, here he is, or do you mean
No,
the
it
sort
was
of
that.
Vesper stuff?
It was the whole Venice sort of
Right.
collapsing
All right.
thing, which was, but it didn't really. You know, you had the Le Chiffre character who it was sort of dispatched fairly early on. It's about once since I've seen it, but then it was just, it was more the fact that the finale didn't sort of involve him, I suppose. But then he's not really that sort of character. You know, he was quite a more grounded sort of villain, really, wasn't he? You know, he wasn't unstoppable or you know, a big sort of massive physical threat to Bond. He was more of an intellectual threat.
Yeah, you're right. Although still the best villain, I think, from the Daniel Craig days.
I mean, Mads Mikkelsen, he's just a great villain in whatever, I think, really.
You can't help but be on his side in a weird way.
No, that's true. Okay, so then we're jumping quite far into the future here with episode 18, which Nicole joined me for an episode we called Humble Pie, or films that we avoided but ended up loving. So we talked The Warriors, which was my choice, and Nicole's choice of Chud. What about you?
I've seen neither of them either. So I have not seen The Warriors, and I know that's a big blind spot. I have picked, like you, something which you would think everyone will have seen. And if you haven't seen it, you know all about it, or at least I thought I did until I watched it very, very recently. And it was the reason that I avoided it was simply because it is in pop culture. Everyone knows about it. Everyone knows the ending. Everyone talks about it. It's been spoofed. It's been remade, and it's been remade, but I'd never seen the original. And it's the original 60s Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Brilliant. Love the Planet of the Apes. Brilliant.
Stunning. Yeah. So good, and really goes to show you that even though you can know what's coming, like I know the final moment, I am completely bought into the story, and it's even more daunting knowing that that's coming as well. It didn't spoil anything. It's like, oh God, this is Earth. What has mankind done? And it's so well made. That's 60 years old, that film.
It's incredible. It's incredible. If you've never seen it, there's a documentary. I had it with the DVD collection called Behind the Planet of the Apes, and it concentrates obviously on the original a lot more, but it does the whole series, and it's just fascinating. I mean, the later films are pretty crap, but I would encourage you to watch that because it's fascinating.
That's interesting. Do you think that because I know that they've made a couple of other films in that vein from the 60s, I think, like I can't remember what they're called, but I assume directly follow on. Are they worth my time as well?
The second one is Beneath the Planet of the Apes isn't too bad. They're all got interesting concepts,
right?
Really interesting concepts. Except maybe the last one, but I think that's Battle for the Planet of the Apes. But just the whole documentary and how those films got made, and you know, the effects at the time and stuff. So the prosthetics were made by John Chambers, who was a war veteran who made prosthetics for people who'd lost arms and eyes and things like that. And he's the guy who, have you seen Argo?
Yeah.
So he is the guy who John Goodman plays in Argo.
Oh, bizarre. Wow.
So it's
okay.
But it is really fascinating. I mean, you know, I'm not going to give much time to Charlton Heston because
he's a terrible human being.
Terrible human being, exactly. And you can see how sort of smug he is in that documentary. But it's just fascinating. It's a really fascinating documentary.
Do you know what, Pete? That is also, I think, why I resisted Planet of the Apes, because of Heston.
Yeah.
And we like, well, how can I watch this man in the leading role, knowing how repugnant he is? But this is something we have to contend with day in, day out now with various Hollywood actors as well. So the performance, I grudgingly have to say, is very good by him. But the whole film, wonderful. Hairs on the back of my neck as it approached that ending. God,
yeah.
I could watch that again. I could watch that again right now.
I mean, just the subtext of that film, about things like, obviously the politics and, science and all that sort of stuff. It's way ahead of its time for something made in the
So ahead
60s.
of its time. They have like a character who is the minister for science and religion.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, brilliant. The minister for science and religion in one person. Great. Okay.
But there are, the sequels that sort of came after that in the original run, they tackle a lot of things like slavery and, racism and all sorts of different things. So they're worth
Okay.
a look. They're worth a look. They're not great, by any stretch, but they're definitely worth a look.
I will. I will check them out. I need my
Mm.
Planet of the Apes fix now.
I tell you what I watched the other day, and I completely forgot there's a nod to Planet of the Apes, and it was Spaceballs.
Oh, I haven't seen it. Blind Spot again. I will check it out for Rick Moranis. Rick Moranis is owed a watch for me on that.
So love that film. Okay, so moving on to episode 20, in which Jamie Russell joined me again for our second spin the wheel subject selector, in which we were churned out best 70s romance. And Jamie picked The Goodbye Girl from 1977. And I picked Harold and Maude from 1971.
Pete, I haven't seen either. I've got Harold and Maude lined up to watch it this weekend.
Yes.
It's been a long time coming, but
I will absolutely love to know what you think of that film, because I think myself and Jamie both absolutely gushed over that film. Brilliant.
so I haven't listened to the episode for exactly that reason. I'm going to be watching it this weekend. I've heard countless good things about it for too long, so I am going to watch it. I can't pretend that what I've picked is anything like either of those without having seen them. I know that it's not like either of those, and it might get a few raised eyebrows, but this was very surprising to me when I finally watched it after a long period of having resisted it. The best 70s romance film. Are you ready for this, Pete? The best 70s romance film
Go on.
is Sylvester Stallone's Rocky.
Wow, okay.
Because that relationship between him and Adrian, even though it's become a bit of a cliche quote punchline with him going Adrian at the end,
Yeah.
their relationship throughout that film is amazing.
Ooh.
It's so like introverted and gentle, and it slowly gets nurtured out, and so sweet and believable, and that carries on throughout the rest of the franchise as well. Their marriage is like, God, this is really lovely, and I was so not expecting that when I watched it, and when I did, I thought, God, let's give Stallone his credit. He wrote that thing. He wrote a really beautiful romantic story, because he treats her with a lot of tenderness and gentleness. But there is one scene which Paul, my co-host, has flagged. There is a scene which is a little bit borderline, where he's a little bit forceful with her in the apartment. And I'm not going to be an apologist for things and whatnot, but I think that was more 70s filmmaking, and it was presented more as this is a man who is trying to be passionate and show that he wants her, as opposed to this is a man who is not going to let her escape kind of thing. But I could see how it could be read that way. Yeah. But me and my wife both love that as well. And I'm not the only person. She also thinks that it's quite beautiful. And watching that with her together for the first time, it's like, wow, I was not expecting it in the Rocky film. And I take that relationship from it more than I do his rise as a fighter and all that stuff.
Fair enough. Good choice. Good choice. So then moving on to episode 21, which Vanessa joined me for best movie about addiction, with her choice of Requiem for a Dream from 2000 and my choice of Trainspotting from 1996. What say you?
Two incredible films. I agree with you that Trainspotting is the better out of the two. Mine is one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. It's British. Hopefully you've seen it. If you haven't, you must. It's called With Nail and I.
I have, yes. I'm not a huge fan of With Nail and I.
Good Lord. Almost everyone that I talk to isn't. It's okay, that's fine. I won't try and convert you. I absolutely love it. I think it's very, very funny. But
I
The
didn't.
reason,
It wasn't a film. It wasn't like I hated it. It was just a. It was just a fine film for me. It was, I don't. It was more that I don't get the love for it that a lot of people have, I
I did
suppose.
what I watched it when I was like a wanky film student as well, so it sort of played into my hands
Yeah.
at that point. But I just think that because I mean they're both alcoholics and drug addicts,
Yeah.
and at the end of the film, one of them straightens up and flies right, and the other doesn't, and it's really tragic. The Richard E. Grant character doesn't, and he gives this beautiful, almost I don't think it's Shakespeare, maybe it is, but he gives this monologue to himself in the pouring rain in the park after his friend has left, and it's like, Jesus, man, you are so talented. You could have had the world, but you've succumbed
Mm.
to drink and drugs because that's easier for you than being brave and putting yourself out there.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
won't try and convince you that it's a good film if it ain't
Well,
for
I
you.
think it's, I think like, I don't know, Requiem for a Dream. I've always felt that Requiem for a Dream, although it tackles the subject of addiction very well, and it sort of, it has a very gnarly sort of outlook on drugs and everything, which it quite rightly should.
Yeah.
But I would always find that films like Trainspotting and With Nail and I always put a much more realistic stance on addiction.
Mm.
And to me, that's a lot more powerful because you see, people just living their lives, and you don't see any good in Requiem for a Dream
No.
because obviously, addicts at some point during their addictions that they're having highs, they're having good time, or they're feeling it or whatever, however you want to put it. But
Yeah.
and Trainspotting and With Their Lie both sort of put that sort of edge on the addiction.
I also think the addiction in both of those is very British. It's
Mm.
presented in a very British way, in a way that
Yeah.
even if you've never taken a drink or taken a drug in your life, you could almost relate to their way of being when they're in the grip of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But sorry, one thing that is interesting about With
Mhm.
Now and I is even
Go
though
on.
it's a great film about addiction, is that Richard E. Grant had never touched a drug or a drink in his life. And then he played that performance.
Wow, that is insane.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that to look at him. I recently watched him, literally yesterday in Saltburn.
Oh yeah. Very good performance, isn't it? By him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just a great film. Great film.
It is a great film.
I'm never gonna be able to listen to Sophie Alice Baxter ever again. Without
Certainly not. It was
thinking of flailing. Sorry.
I can only imagine how many takes they had to do of that. But if I was Barry Keoghan, I would not want to be flapping around for that long because he was doing it for a fair old while and there were no edits.
No, well, I mean, he's not got nothing to be ashamed about, has he?
I almost think that makes it worse for him, though, right? If you're
I don't
flapping
know.
around with length, that's could be quite painful after a while.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, if that was me, I'd go on tour. But
Yeah, you'd find a way to make some money out of it, that's for sure. And hey, he has.
yeah. Okay, so moving on to our last subject for you, episode 23, which was Tarquin joined me for Best Female Directed Horror, with Tarquin's choice of Near Dark from 1987 and my choice of The Babadook from 2014.
Babadook wins that out of the two. I really didn't like Near Dark. My choice is from 2019, 2020.
Ooh.
And it's called Relic.
Yes. Relic,
You've seen this?
Yeah. I have, yes. Yeah.
Brilliant film. Brilliant
Yeah.
film. It snuck up on me. I was enjoying it. I was like, this is pretty good. And then as it went on, and again, I want to be careful here because I don't know, there may be people who haven't seen it, that there's a sort of revelation in the last 15, 20 minutes, which is quite visceral, like quite grotesque horror on a primal level, but it kind of represents something else, doesn't it? And I think emotionally, I mean, this ties into a question you asked earlier about emotions. Emotionally, for me, I had experience of, well, we're talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, right? As the theme that's in the film anyway.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much there from the start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of is presented in this really quite brutal and shocking way at the end. And it's like, it's true. It is a monster. It's as much a monster as many other things are in life. We assign the term monster to people, but it should be assigned to things, experiences, monstrous experiences. And Alzheimer's and dementia is a monstrous, horrible fucking thing. So to essentially present that as your antagonist in a horror film and put it into one of the characters, an elderly character, was both horrifying and also deeply, deeply moving. And I thought she really, really got the balance right in that film of making a scary film, working on that primal level, but also being so revealing about a condition. And I think, I don't know, maybe people who haven't had experiences but I think a lot of people haven't had experiences or know people who've suffered with something like that. Maybe it doesn't resonate quite as much. But for me, I just thought it was so well handled.
Yeah.
I don't think it was offensive in any way. And clearly the filmmaker, who unfortunately the name passes me by, I'm going to get her name up in a second, but I feel like she must have had personal experience because it felt too real. Yeah. Perfect balance of serious subject matter in a horror film.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. I must admit, it didn't sort of pop up as a main sort of consideration for me. But it was a film I really thought was really good. Very effective as a, not just that sort of social piece, I suppose, really at its base, but it was a really effective horror film as well. It was genuinely creepy, which
exactly, and it's got to be able to work as on a base level as a horror film, even without all the subtext and themes. It's got to be scary, and it was. Natalie Erica James, that is the director's name. Natalie Erica James.
Yeah.
And Emily Mortimer, of course, is the lead.
She's really good in it. And I think, well, I think, it's a three-hander, really, isn't it? That film.
Yeah, it is.
And there were all really strong performances in that.
I think the shame of it is it came out in 2020 when all these films were just getting buried because they were being released when nobody could really go to the cinema. So I don't really know what sort of theatrical release it would have got, especially in this country. So maybe it didn't quite reach the audience that it might have. But yeah, check it out. If you haven't seen it, listeners, go and check that one out.
Yeah, definitely. Although I would say it's not as good as The Relic from 1996.
Tom Sizemore.
Brilliant film.
I did watch that last year. We'll disagree on that one, but yeah.
No, okay.
It's a fine film, that Relic. It is.
It's of its time. Certainly the CGI is of its time.
One of Quentin Tarantino's favourite films, apparently.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know.
Oh, well, I can put myself in the same boat as Quentin Tarantino.
You can indeed. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Okay, so that about wraps us up, Ben. Listen, thank you so much. So much. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure has genuinely been all mine. It's flown by already. I'm sad that we're at an end.
But just quickly before we wrap things up, just tell people how they can listen to you on Filmbusters, where they can get in touch and how they can sort of take part.
You can check out Filmbusters by searching Filmbusters Pods on all the usual socials. We're particularly active on Twitter. Refuse to call it X, Twitter. And if you want to listen in to something from the last couple of years, please don't go into our back catalogue because the early days are a little bit ropey. So we're much better now. So please listen to something from the last year or two. And do leave us a comment if you've listened and let us know if you like what you hear.
And definitely. Well, first of all, listen to the episodes that Jamie's been on. I think he's done Aliens most recently.
Aliens.
Burn
After Reading.
And
he's done The Vanishing.
RoboCop.
Yeah.
And Vanishing. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you search those titles, you'll be able to see.
And Misery. He's done 5.
Oh, Misery.
Bloody
Jesus,
hell.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so well, I think if you just search Jamie on the whatever podcast platform you look at and Filmbusters, then you'll find Jamie
You
Russell's
will
episodes.
indeed.
And I would thoroughly recommend, because Jamie recommended it to me, and I totally agreed with him, your episode on Whiplash, which I think is still sat at the top of your leaderboard. Is that right?
I think you may be right. Paul is our stats man, but I think you may be right. It's either that or I think it might be Serbian film.
What?
Yes, I know. Quite an appalling piece of work.
Yeah. That shouldn't, I mean, I've seen it, and it's an interesting film for definitely. And it's not for the faint-hearted at all. But
it ain't.
I wouldn't put it at the top of any list.
No,
it needs to exist in a space, some void in space and time as just a film that exists and is interesting.
Listen, it says more about the listeners than it does us that it's one of the most listened to episodes. So
okay, so thank you very much, Ben. It just leaves me to say goodbye, and for Ben to say.
Monty, you terrible cunt. What do you do prowling around in the middle of the fucking night?